Sometimes you just need to take the slips out and bowl defensively. And you also need to be careful with your computer's defense as well. If you need a VPN, go Nord. NordVPN.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. So put in some dot balls and turn them into maidens via NordVPN.com/Kimber.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 22 of the Overthrows podcast. I'm Behram Kazi, who you can find at DefMango on Twitter. And with me, as always, is Jared Kimber, who you can find literally everywhere. We've got a bunch of people in the comment section already. I recognize Swami Nathan Ramesh Sashi. Then there's Revant Nayan Avri. Siddharth is there. Varun Tiwari. Pengu the Penguin. Okay. Vikas Mayakar. So hello to all of you guys. Just a quick reminder to everybody that, and I'll do this before every podcast, or I'll try to, that you can go to goodareas.co and bookmark that webpage. That can be your one-stop shop for all of the work that we do as part of our team, whether it be written content, podcasts, or videos. And as always, we'll jump right into the T20 World Cup and do the roundup for that. Jared, the Super 8 stage has been fun. Funner than I expected it to be. We know already that India, England, and South Africa have qualified, and that India will be playing England in Guyana. But what a riveting situation we have at our hands, where it'll most likely be one of Afghanistan and or Australia, who will qualify for this other semi-final. Bangladesh don't seem to have much of a chance, but who thought we'd be here?
Well, I mean, the fact that all three can qualify from the last game does give you something, doesn't it? Obviously, by the time most people listen to this podcast will know who it is. Look, Afghanistan have looked like two wildly different teams at times in this tournament. Mostly good, but then occasionally when they have to bat second, they look like you and I are batting for them. When they're on wickets that don't give them their bowlers any assistance, again, it doesn't look like a great team, but when things are in their favor, they look like a team who can make the final, right? And that's as simple as it is. They might still lose to Bangladesh, though, right? I mean, Bangladesh is actually it's a very similar team to them. So who knows where we will be, and there'll be people listening to this after it's happened, of course, as well. But as we sit here, Afghanistan have done everything they can to put themselves in a position so far to get themselves through to the final, and Australia didn't.
Yeah.
Or semi-final, I should say, not final.
In their own hands, of course. If they do beat Bangladesh, they go through. Australia will require Bangladesh to do them a favor. That's not a position that Australia like to be in ever. It's very un-Australian. But hey, we thought of them as one of the favorites for the tournament, and here they are, hanging by a thread. Because, I mean, if you'd ask me, I'd back Afghanistan to win that game. But you're not wrong to say that Bangladesh could as well, which really adds to the beauty of this entire situation. But everyone who will be listening, or most of you guys who aren't live at least, will know the result of that game. Let's come to the India-Australia game from today, right? And I want to start with Rohit Sharma. 92 runs off 41 deliveries. He scored the fastest half-century of this edition of the T20 World Cup, which was in 19 deliveries. He smashed Mitchell Starc for 4 sixes and a boundary in a single over in the power play. That is the most expensive over that Starc has ever bowled in his career. Rohit was always capable of this. We knew this from ODI World Cup Rohit. But, in the T20 format, after a poor IPL, we hadn't quite seen him live up to that same sort of reputation. We saw glimpses of it, right? Even in the Bangladesh game. This was when he really epitomized that role. And oh boy, was that some clean striking of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of times in this tournament, I think I've just seen him go out off the toe of his bat, trying to play one of those pickup flicks. But the intent's been there. And it's funny, like, there was one game, which was it? Was the Afghanistan game, where they didn't go as hard at the top. And straight away, the Indian fans were like, is this it? And I'm like, no, I don't think that is. I think they just saw decent bowling and were expecting to cash in at the back end of the power play. But they have shown intent and they've continued to go at it. I thought it was really interesting, too, that they had the rain break and came back out after the rain break, and he kept going almost first ball after the rain break, or second ball, whenever it was. So clearly he was just like, this is what I can do. It's very interesting that we don't see this from Mumbai.
Yeah.
which is something very, a different conversation we had on a different day, but also equally interesting. But this version of Rohit, most of us would pick, right? And I don't just mean the runs. I mean, with that level of intent, he just terrifies teams, right? Because there aren't really places you can bowl to him. And his ability to clear boundaries quite easily is just on a completely different level. And it shaped that game, and it took an innings almost as powerful on the other side from Travis Head to pull it back. But unfortunately, that didn't happen for the Australians. And so Rohit's innings is the defining one of that game, and might be the reason that Australia don't win the World Cup.
Yeah, perhaps. And I mean, whoever witnessed that innings from Rohit will definitely remember it for a very, very long time. I do feel like that was the best I've ever seen him in a T20 game. He looked absolutely effortless, scoring those, monster hits. And India scored 205 in the first innings, right? And Josh Hazlewood from Australia returned figures of 1 for 14. He was pretty much the only Aussie pacer who got his lengths right tonight, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he worked that pitch out in a way that the others kind of didn't. Look, Pat Cummins has got a lot of positive, thoughts and everything from what happened in the World Cup final, and from even what happened at the start of the IPL. But the truth is that Pat Cummins, over a long period of time now, has been very hittable in white ball cricket. And Mitchell Starc, since he started trying to bowl the wobble ball, hasn't been the same white ball force that he once was. And I think what we saw again is that. And there's this whole thing of that Australians will always come good in the finals because Mitchell Starc just did it recently, and Pat Cummins did it in the World Cup before. And Mitchell Starc did quite well towards the end of the ODI World Cup as well. But sometimes that's also conditions. And the pitch is helping you at the right time. Sometimes you spend more time preparing for a final so you can really work out the individual matchups and everything else. The truth is that Hazlewood has been the best white ball bowler for Australia, certainly seamer for Australia for quite some time now. And what we saw was him bowling really well again. And Starc didn't get it right. And Cummins didn't get it right. And that's a lot of bowlers when you consider that they don't have a strong fifth bowler, right? They have to manufacture their fifth bowler from two guys who are not quite good enough to bowl 4 overs on their own. Some days that works, some days that doesn't. Today that didn't work. It gets magnified by the fact that the two of their best bowlers didn't really handle the situation perfectly, and that's it. That's the whole thing, right? That's kit and caboodle. One of those guys has a decent game, or good, or even a better than that, and Australia isn't that far behind. They're 24 runs behind. A good performance from either of those guys, and said they both went at 2 runs a ball.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Cummins was on a hat-trick of hat-tricks, right? He had taken 2 consecutive hat-tricks in the games prior versus Afghanistan and Bangladesh, which was, I mean, the only time we've ever seen something like that in international cricket is when Wasim Akram took 2 back-to-back hat-tricks in those test matches versus Sri Lanka. So a lot of people came out with their puns on Twitter. Hat Cummins, Hattie Cummins, hat-trick Cummins, loved all of those. But then today, he did kind of shit the bed. He could have had 4 and 4 versus Afghanistan, actually, but Warner dropped the catch. He could have done a Malinga, but that didn't quite work out. Adam
You're
Zampa
right,
was
but,
also really
But just to
poor,
go back to
wasn't
that, yeah. I've got my microphone on. Sorry. My son just got attacked by our cat and started screaming, if anyone heard that in the background. He took those wickets against Afghanistan, which obviously changed the direction of the game at the end and everything else, right? And gave Australia a bit of a chance. But he didn't really have an impact at the start when he needed to. And those hat-tricks are not actually important hat-tricks, right? Yeah. They're just like dot balls at the death, right? And so, basically, again, it's about having the impact. And if you look at against Afghanistan, he actually bowled a brilliant over early on when he kept beating the bat again and again against Gabars. But then Gabars just smacks him down the ground for a 6, not at the end of that. And I think the problem with Cummins as a player at the moment is that. And also, you're just on the hat-trick thing in general. Not all hat-tricks are equal. And so I think we have to, I realized that in 2015 when Stephen Finn took one at the end of ODI when Australia had scored about 1,900,000 runs. And so I know everyone got excited because he took them back to back and all this sort of stuff. But the real truth is that he didn't really impact either of those games in the way that he should have. And of course, Stark was dropped, right?
Yeah.
In that game. So that tells you a little bit about where Australia see him. Even for an extra spinner, I don't think Australia would have dropped him in the past. But yeah, well done to Pat Cummins for getting 2 hat-tricks. But he'd probably give you every hat-trick he's ever taken to get them into the semi-finals at this point.
I suppose so. And of course, like the value of one individual wicket is also lesser in T20s compared to the other formats. So of course, I agree that not all hat-tricks are equal. I think Adam Zampa was poor. Even in the Afghanistan game, it was just that final over that he bowled really well, where he bounced out Ibrahim Zadran and took 2 wickets, right? He ended with 2 for 28. And if you look at the scorecard, you're like, all right, that's not bad. It was bad. And today versus India as well, he got hammered. So I feel like that's another area where Australia, could have been better, and they could have prevented themselves being in this situation. The fielding as well, Jared.
And it's worth saying, though, that he's been their best bowler, right, by a distance.
Yeah.
Like, he's been dominating their bowling. And, Shivam Dubé got hold of him at one stage today, but a few people scored off him, right? It wasn't just going up against Shivam Dubé. And as you said, against Afghanistan, again, a situation where you would expect him to dominate a little bit more than he did. Neither him or Cummins were bad against Afghanistan, but neither of them actually stood up in the way that you would expect. And if you look at the Afghanistan game, it was like Stoinis kind of starts that. No, I don't want to call it a comeback, but Australia not getting smacked by the openers anymore at that point. So, there's questions there. They can still slip into this final, though. It's worth saying that. And if they do, and they're playing South Africa, I don't know. Like, I almost think that either Afghanistan or Australia could quite easily beat South Africa, because I know we'll get to them later, but they are a mindfuck of a team at the moment.
Yeah, we'll definitely come to them later. It's interesting that Australia, after all of this, can still potentially make it to the semis. I feel like the one singular area where they've been terrible, and I say this when I speak of all teams in this competition, is the fielding and catching department. Their catching rates have been terrible. They dropped plenty versus Afghanistan. Ashton Agar bowled an economical spell, went for like 17 runs in 4 overs, but he could not field the ball for the life of him, right? And Wade missed a stumping, Gurbaz is stumping. Today, Mitch Marsh dropped a dolly. Pandya scored a couple of sixes after. So, that could have, mattered. And I just feel like Australia's catching has been a major hindrance and is a detriment, to their cause, because this is, again, not something we really associate with Australian cricket. They're supposed to be catching everything.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I thought they started the ODI World Cup fielding quite poorly. I don't remember if they dropped a lot of catches, but they weren't as sharp in the field. It doesn't look like, to me, the greatest fielding side Australia have ever had out there. David Warner's no longer in his peak, right? Mitchell Marsh has usually good hands, but is not, the most brilliant mover in the field. Travis Head is probably one of the worst fielders they've ever had as a specialist batter in a very, very long time. Matthew Wade is, Matthew Wade, I think it was the Afghanistan game, he fumbled one at the end that went for a couple. That was just like, it just didn't need to happen, and it was quite a poor effort. So I don't know if it's, and Glenn Maxwell, one of the world's best fielders that we've ever seen, no longer moves like one of the world's best fielders we've ever seen, right? And Tim David is a fascinating character when it comes to fielding, because he gets the ball so quickly and they seem to clang off him in all sorts of directions. So I think it's not maybe a great Australian team, but it's going to be a part of the story, isn't it? The Ashton Agar thing. Yeah. It was 2 boundaries, if I remember correctly, and then the drop of one of the openers. I can't remember who it was who dropped, but
yeah, I can't remember which opener, but those 2 boundary fumbles were really poor.
Yeah, and at times when Australia was building pressure. So, and we know what the Afghanistan openers do. One blocks during pressure and the other one slogs during pressure. You only need a couple of extra balls at any one time to really get them into a situation where you've got a good chance of getting a wicket. So yeah, it's obviously not ideal, and part of it. They played a really good first part of the tournament, though. Yeah, and there were times during this particular game against India where they were favourites. Yeah. Right? The bookies and the betting, all the betting markets had them as favourites when Maxwell was out there with Travis Head. And I thought they bowled and fielded poorly. And probably, I thought par was about 195. And so obviously India went beyond that. And yet, after 11 overs, they were favourites. I think that tells you a lot about how, about how good Australia can be. But it's not a perfect team, and they are coming to the end. There's a couple of very good players there that are not the players that they were a few years ago. And I wonder if even 2 years ago, this team just works out a way to win that game in a way that they couldn't this time. And you could say that about either of those two games, the Afghanistan game or the India game.
Yeah, I mean, it is a fascinating point, and at least versus Afghanistan, there were so many chances and half chances that they could have hung on to, but instead they took a wicket on the 95th delivery of the game, right? Australia have never taken that long to take a wicket. But also, we've spoken about everything else. Let's just talk about the batting a bit, right? Of course, Travis Head was amazing today, scored 76 of 43, was that one shining light. At many a time, it seemed like he would take Australia over the line. Glenn Maxwell nearly, broke Afghan hearts in that game, scored 59 and looked like he would take it away from them, but this time he did not. But apart from those two knocks, there's one David Warner 50 in the Super 8s versus Bangladesh, an innings in which he got dropped early. Australia's batters didn't really turn up like we expected them to in the Super 8 stage.
No, I mean, it's not a lot of games, is it? And I think if you look all tournament long, I would assume that Head, Stoinis and Maxwell probably... Oh, well, did Maxwell and Warner, did they have one innings each?
Maxwell and Warner did have one innings each.
And then Head had a couple. And did Stoinis have maybe a couple?
You can say Maxwell had 2 innings, no?
I'm trying to think.
I can't remember.
It just doesn't, you look at that lineup and I don't think it looked like a batting lineup where multiple players were chipping in. And that can happen in a T20 World Cup because you don't play a lot of games. And, if Head's doing so well, the players down the order don't always get a chance and everything else. But I mean, Travis Head looks a level above everyone else based on what we're seeing at the moment. We know that Warner's obviously leaving. We know that, Maxwell's getting on and his athleticism isn't quite the same. Marcus Stoinis is probably near his peak as a player. And Mitch Marsh has already won Australia a World Cup in T20 cricket. So, no one's throwing him under the car. But yeah, it didn't look as strong as it could have. Once they lose 2 wickets, and the market lost complete faith in them when Maxwell went out, which I thought was really, really interesting. Because once they lost 2 wickets, you do start to think to yourself, well, Stoinis is a slow starter and he doesn't love spin. Tim David's going to have to come in pretty early after that if Stoinis doesn't do very well. Matthew Wade, this isn't his position. This is, I know he's done it against Pakistan once, but he hasn't done it multiple times. And, it's tough for him because he doesn't always come in all that much. And it's not a position he plays for the majority of his cricket, all these sorts of things. You do start to look at it and you go, oh, the first 4, they just can beat you in so many ways. Certainly 3 of them. And then from then on in, you do start to think to yourself, well, it's okay. And on paper, it makes a lot of sense. But you do feel that they needed someone like Stoinis to be in killer form, which he was in the first part. And let's be honest, he was dropped, right? Yeah. Hardik Pandya dropped him and the ball just landed back in his hand, right? Which is brilliant reflexes, but the catch was dropped and was taken on the second chance. If that goes through Hardik Pandya or he drops it, Australia might still have won that game again. So that's the kind of fine margins that you find yourself in. But if you allow the opposition to make more runs than expected, and you're going up against, Bumrah and Kuldeep Yadav, who in those conditions are going to stretch you, you're already behind the 8 ball and you need everything to go your way. And it probably wasn't for Australia in this tournament.
Absolutely. And we'll see. We'll find out in a few hours whether or not Australia have made it to the semi-finals or not. But if they don't, they only have themselves to blame because there were a lot of lapses in there. Anyway, let's come to India. We spoke about Rohit earlier. Let's talk about Kuldeep Yadav. He turned the game for India tonight, with the ball. When he got rid of Marsh and Maxwell, that's kind of where India, got their noses ahead in that contest. He ended with 2 for 24 next to his name, following up that performance of 3 for 19 versus Bangladesh. Now you've got Kuldeep, and then you've got Bumrah, who in the Super 8 stage has taken 3 for 7 versus Afghanistan, 2 for 13 versus Bangladesh, and 1 for 29 tonight versus Australia, which comes out to 6 for 49 in 12 overs. That is 8 overs of absolute monstrosity. And I personally feel that if India are to win this T20 World Cup, that's the bowling pair that wins it for them.
Yeah, it's huge. So I was just having a look. 'Cause I thought I did this. So I backed, Kuldeep Yadav to take the most wickets in the tournament before they got to New York and decided not to play him, which I agreed with, by the way. And I'm trying to see what I got him at. I think he was like 25 or 30 to 1 at that stage. And, you know, he hasn't been as awesome since he came in. But you could see in a game like today just how much impact he can have, right? And his ability to string wickets together, his ability to spin the ball both ways. You know, it's what, is it 7 wickets in the last 3 games I think he's played now? You know, he's really put together an incredible run. And they lose this game if they went with an extra batter, or they went with an extra fast bowler over Kuldeep Yadav. They, you know, Akshar and Jadeja wouldn't have been able to have the same kind of impact that he had, and that's the big difference that he makes. And look, he's been bowling fantastically for a long time now, and you know, it also tells you about the flexibility of India. That they can have, that they can go without him for a few games and it doesn't matter, and then he can be brought back at the right time, and also still feel confident enough to dominate there. So yeah, absolutely, he was huge, and on a day where Bumrah went for runs, right?
Yeah. And save your breath on Bumrah. I know he's been fantastic, but we're going to record a footmarks on Bumrah later, so you guys can look forward to that. But yeah, I mean, on the New York surface, it made sense to not play Kuldeep, and ever since he's come into the side, he's been phenomenal, particularly in these last 2 games. I think today, his spell kind of changed the game, and that's why India won, ultimately. Coming to the batting, of course, Rohit was brilliant today, but apart from him, you know, Sky is another batter who's doing well. He scored 53 of 28 versus Afghanistan, and he smashed a quick-fire 31 today as well versus Australia. Hardik Pandya as well, he had a terrible IPL, but he's turned things around, has had some good games with the ball in hand as well, but I think what's really key over here is that his 50 of 27 versus Bangladesh was the best of those cameos that we saw throughout that game from India, right? He's the only one who got to 50. He smashed big towards the end. And with both of those guys doing well, right, Sky and Pandya, then you've got Rohit, who's gotten some confidence up top. You see that a lot of things are now going right for India, whether it be batting or bowling. And that is, you know, a very, very promising sign, given that now they're just going to play a semi-final directly, which also could be washed out, Jared. There's like an 85% chance of rain in that Guyana semi-final.
There's a reserve day for that one, though, isn't there? I think.
No, there's not a reserve day for that one. They're like extended hours. That's
is it reserved for the other one? Is there?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Which is messed up.
I knew it was one of them. I couldn't even remember.
I mean, England won a World Cup, an ODI World Cup on boundary count. So if they get knocked out in the semi-final like this, is it the worst thing in the world?
As you said, Rohit has made runs now. Rishabh Pant has made runs. It might be Virat Kohli's worst World Cup ever, as we were discussing in the group chat today. I don't know if this counts as runs for Sky against a good team, because he made 31 off 16, and I'm sure people will completely forget that, but I thought it was a really important innings.
Yes.
Shivam Dube played a very important role today, and it's one of the reasons he's in the side, even if he's still not in peak form. And it's literally, they couldn't bowl Glenn Maxwell when he was out there.
Yeah.
Which meant that Marcus Stoinis ended up going for 56 runs. And it's one of those things that people forget, that the impact of Shivam Dube is so massive because of that, that they decided very early, Australia, that it's not spinning all that much, so we're not going to use our second spinner at all. And, you know, Stoinis got absolutely hammered all the way through. Got a couple of wickets, to be fair to him, but absolutely hammered. And then, as you said, Hardik did well, and I think Jadeja hit a big 6 at the end, right? You're pretty happy with that, those last couple of games based on everything. You would want Virat to make runs. I think that's an obvious one. But at the moment, I think you'd be pretty confident outside of that if you're India looking at that batting lineup. If you're looking at the bowling lineup, you know, the Akshar Jadeja thing still doesn't quite work. But it may not matter once they get to wickets that are spinning sideways. And they can work that out when they get there, so that's not the end of the world. Arshdeep's still going for runs, but he got wickets today, so that will make them feel a little bit more comfortable. Hardik was interesting. The way they used Hardik today, I will never truly understand what they were thinking with the... I was just like, just bowl spin from both ends and try and take a wicket and get this game back. And instead, they just went with Hardik. And Travis Head, I think before today, scored at a strike rate of about 250 against Hardik. I don't know what it is after today. So they put themselves in a bit of a weird position there. But again, Hardik has bowled well in this tournament, right? So I think they're in a really good position, all things considered, for how it goes. But let's be honest, for them and South Africa, nothing before this matters. Right? Yes. And you could almost say the same for Australia. If Australia make the semi-final, it doesn't matter how Australia or Pakistan make a semi-final, you're still worried about playing them in a semi-final, right? And I think that's the case for India. Like, we can talk them up as much as we want. When they actually get to the semi-final and the final and something happens, Josh Buttler or Phil Salt goes nuts, right? What happens then? That's the real question of whether we know that this is a team that's going to be able to win or not. And we saw that in the last ODI World Cup. And as I said before, we can make the same thing with South Africa.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I do feel like India, if that semi-final actually happens, do have the edge in Guyana, given the conditions. But you know what? Kohli has had a shit tournament. We can't just sidestep that. He looked really good versus Bangladesh. I thought that would be the day where he comes back into form. And it looked like he was back in form, but then he got cleaned up. I feel like India's catching also has been a bit dodgy, hasn't it? Like, sure, Akshar held on to that one-handed screamer today, a sure shot candidate for catch of the tournament, along with Stephen Taylor's effort in the slips. But if I look at India's catching across the Super 8 stage, Kohli dropped a dolly versus Afghanistan, then Rishabh Pant dropped a catch versus Bangladesh, I believe, and Arshdeep dropped Marsh today. Who knows how crucial that drop could have been, had the result gone the other way. So I feel like India need to kind of pick up the slack when it comes to their catching because, sure, there are 8 overs of Kuldeep and Bumrah, but then everyone's going to attack the other 12 overs. We know that already. And
no, I think that's fair.
They're not going to want to, let this one slip because they're in a really, really good position over here. They might be already in the final. And this is a fantastic team. They've got most bases covered.
Yeah, I think everything you've said there is correct. I don't think they're fielding like Australia's level at the moment, which they'd be pretty happy with. Probably for most of their history, they would be disappointed with that statement, but at the moment, they'd be pretty happy with it. Look, I just think this is an interesting World Cup for them because in some ways, it's the World Cup with the least amount of pressure. And the reason for that is it's not particularly, they're not in the Indian time zone. And it's not a World Cup that has the same... I know the Indian matches are all in a good time zone for Indian fans, but the World Cup in its totalitarian state is not in a good time zone. So it's kind of a quasi-World Cup. Plus, it comes after just one from 5 minutes ago. We're on the third T20 World Cup in like 4 years or whatever, 3 years or whatever we're up to, right? It's just a weird one from that point of view. If they're going to play with freedom, I would expect this to be the World Cup that they do that. Don't really want to be in a situation where your fielding lets you down. If Phil Salt beats you, fine. If unwritten or Kia rips through you, fine. These things happen. Don't think you want to be in a situation where you talk about the drop catches today. Either the Stoinis or the Marsh. They ended up taking the Stoinis catch, but you know what I mean. If Hardik had dropped it down rather than up, and the Mitch Marsh one drop as well. They would have been in a situation where either of those things could have changed the trajectory of the game. Wouldn't have mattered as much for their tournament probably, but again, this is the bit that matters the most now, and every mistake is going to be scrutinized, and that's where they've struggled over recent years.
Yeah, they also have that whole getting defensive in the knockouts thing, but I feel like this team's not going to do that. The way they're playing, I feel like they've got that bit sorted. Of course, time will tell if they truly have that sorted or not. But yeah, let's take a break and come back to the rest of the teams. You guys are watching Overthrows with Jared and Behram, and we will be back after this short ad.
I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.
Welcome back to Overthrows. You guys are with Jared and Behram, and another game that happened recently, which was a virtual quarterfinal, South Africa versus West Indies. South Africa won that game. It was a thriller, and it was a funny game, right? South Africa, too, dropped a host of catches, right? But they got their tactics right, Jared. Markram, I feel, read the surface really, really well. He picked Shamsi ahead of Bartman for that particular game. And then he bowled himself out by like the 8th over of the game. And he also ended with 1 for 28. So that was a good move. And all the spinners did well. Shamsi, who came in the team, took 3 for 27. Maharaj took 1 for 24. Kagiso Rabada bowled his first over in like the 18th over of the innings, which was really, really fascinating. But I feel like Markram, the captain, orchestrated this win in, more than one way. I'd have to say that.
Yeah, I think he was really important. I think you're right. He did work out the pitch very well. It was I don't think I ever rated West Indies as high as anyone else, and I'm sure we'll get onto them in a moment. It's still, what are they? South Africa won 7 games in this tournament, 6 games.
Yeah, they're unbeaten.
Yeah.
They actually have one more game than India because one of India's games got washed out.
Yeah.
They are the most successful team of this T20 World Cup thus far.
So my question to you is, how confident do you feel that they're going to win the title?
Not particularly confident. And I know CS is going to hate me for this. CS is one of our colleagues, and the other day, even in the chat, he was saying that you guys never have anything nice to say about South Africa. But look, I think they have been impressive in many ways as well. I think Quinton de Kock has been in fine form. And he's been absolutely, he saved his explosive best for the Super 8 stages, the 74 of 40 versus the USA, 65 of 38 versus England. And apart from him, I've seen cameos from Miller and Klaasen, right? They've been good in patches. They've scored valuable runs, Miller versus England, Klaasen when he took down Gudakesh Moti versus the West Indies. But they haven't looked ultra convincing as a batting unit, South Africa. Take de Kock out, and all of a sudden, you're kind of picking up the scraps.
I would say every single one of their players has played a really good game. Batters and bowlers, right? I wonder how many of their games they've had more than a handful of players actually be the reason they've won. And I think they've played a lot of games that came down to the wire that could have gone either way, and that it keeps going their way in those closer games. The West Indies one is another example of that, right? West Indies or England, both of those games, very, very clear that those games could have gone the other way. And they keep getting over the line. And it's very hard for me to tell if we are seeing a new South Africa that has worked out how to win ugly, and so therefore they should be a genuine chance to win the title, or if we are seeing something else. And what we are seeing is a team that has ridden its luck a little bit, got away with it, has 11 players that are good, but for some reason they can't find more than 3 or 4 of them on one day that ever do any good, but they've managed to get by in a bunch of games. And I don't know which South Africa this is. Before the tournament, it's funny to see it says that, because I had them as one of my 3 genuine title teams, ahead of India. Right? The tournament has changed a lot because I think the wickets were way better for spin than I thought they were going to be. I thought they would help spin, but not quite like this. And so I would pull back on my original thing. But I had South Africa in my top 3. I kind of feel that at the moment, and I don't know who they're going to play in the semi-final, but I'm not sure if I wouldn't back either of those opponents. Probably not Bangladesh, although Bangladesh almost beat South Africa as well. Yeah, but probably not Bangladesh. But certainly the other 2 teams, I think I'd be really interested. I mean, Afghanistan, if it's a turning wicket and they bat first, are a huge chance of beating South Africa. And I think Australia would be pretty happy to play South Africa in that semi-final and let the other 2 teams ding themselves in the face a little bit on the other side of the draw. So we're back in the same spot. individually, you look at it and you go, well, this bowling attack should be dominating. But it's like every game they find a way to just, like Marco Janssen, just like, I'm not going to bowl today, lads, just so that you're all aware. Today, I don't know where to pitch the ball. Bartman is just like, all I have to do is hit the pitch, right? If I just hit the pitch over and over again, we're going to win this game. Yep, that's all you have to do. I'm going to bowl 5 full tosses, right? Rabada, I'm in New York. I understand that this wicket's a bit up and down. So if I just keep hitting the wicket, I'm going to get I'm going to go at 8 runs and over. Like, just things like that. You know, Shamsi bowled brilliantly in 2 games. The other game might as well have been you bowling, right? Maharaj, consistently getting his lengths wrong and then just occasionally bowling absolutely beautifully. So,
I mean, I will challenge you over there. Keshav Maharaj has had a brilliant Super 8 run, right? He took 1 for 24 versus the West Indies, 2 for 25 versus England, and 1 for 24 versus the USA. So he's been that one player in the Super 8s who's always turned up.
His numbers look fine. I think I've watched every ball he's bowled in this tournament. In fact, I watched them again the other day. I think his numbers absolutely flatter him. I don't think he's bowled anywhere near his best so far. I think he routinely got his lengths wrong at the start. I think he's better in the Super 8s. But you also have to remember, he should be better in the Super 8s because most of the spinners have been better because it's now all in the West Indies. I think he's probably their most consistent bowler. Nortje has been absolutely fantastic at times and then occasionally hasn't as well. Like, do you know what I mean? It's just, they feel, here's my main point at the moment. Crunch time, really important moment in a game. Who is the bowler that they trust to get it done? Right? Conversely, crunch time in the batting, who is the batter that they trust to get it done, right? Yeah. Now, that sort of takes Quinton de Kock out of it just because openers are a little bit different in those sorts, you know. But Quinton de Kock might be that guy on basis of current form. But I'm just looking at it and I'm just like, I don't know. I don't feel it. Now, they have the 11 players, but the same thing keeps happening to them. They lose 2, 3, 4 wickets early on. They shut up shop. And then they just manage to squeak by or get enough runs to defend in the end. It just keeps happening, Bayram, right? And so how many times can you see the same thing happen in front of you before you start to go, well, that's eventually going to break. That model is going to break when they get to a really important game. 2 must-win games. If they lose early wickets in both of them again, that is my concern. And they are playing like a team that is terrified of being 4 wickets down. That's not how England, India, and Australia play, right?
I am not as convinced with their batting, of course, barring, Quinton de Kock. And I have liked both of Klaasen and Miller at times. But if I look at their bowling attack, particularly their pace bowling attack, right? We all know Kagiso Rabada is class, but he's had a pretty poor T20 World Cup. Take that 3 for 18 versus the USA out of the equation, and you have a really poor World Cup. Anrik Nortje, brilliant in New York. After that, not as brilliant. And of course, Otniel Bartman became Otniel full tossman, bowling those 5 full tosses. But prior to that, he was okay. He was all right. He wasn't the worst bowler in the world. Yeah, Marco Janssen's fitness is a concern right now. I don't know if he's fully fit because he took that blow when he collided with Kagiso Rabada. So will he make
And he was bowling shit before that as well.
Yeah. I mean, he was bowling a lot of wides and gave a lot of width.
Wrong lengths in different times. Yeah, he really, his radar's all over the shop at the moment. He can bowl the best ball in the world or the worst ball in the world from ball to ball. I really worry about him taking the new ball in a knockout game. And if he's not fit, then even more so. Rabada, I don't know what's going on with Rabada at the moment. He just doesn't seem to have his head fully screwed on. And we've already seen with Bartman, when he had a chance to win a game for his team, completely bottled it, right? Completely bottled that situation. Now, I love him. I love his story. I've been following him for years. We talked about it before. I've been wondering why he's never got a game before. We now see him at a World Cup, and he has bowled well at times, right? But if Marco Janssen is not bowling, or is struggling again, that puts a lot of pressure on him. They've got away with a couple of games of Markram. They might have got away with as much Markram as you can get away with. It's a bit like the Glenn Maxwell thing, isn't it? So you get about 2-3 games out of him and you get a bit excited, and then eventually it's probably people are going to be like, oh, they're just going to bring Markram on now, so let's prepare for Markram. And you have to change a little bit. I still think they have an 11 players that is interesting and that in some ways is more of a side that I respect than Australia, even beforehand. I just felt that Australia had players who weren't going to worry about their deficiencies. Like Australia play like a team that don't care that Glenn Maxwell and Marcus Stoinis are not very good as a fifth bowler. right? They really do play that way. They play like Mitchell Starc is still Mitchell Starc of 5 years ago, right? That's how they play. Whereas you watch that game against West Indies last night. Have a look at the scoreboard if you haven't seen it, but Varun put it up. The runs. Watch what happens when they lose 4 wickets. Watch all the way through this tournament what happens when they lose 4 wickets. That's a fucking giant albatross for me. And I've been writing about their middle order, since, I don't know, almost 1992, right? The way the same thing keeps happening again and again, and it feels like a similar kind of thing that they are going to... It's not that those guys aren't stars, because we know Tristan Stubbs can hit almost any ball he wants for 6, and David Miller is a freak, and Heinrich Klaasen is incredible. So then it's not that their number 4, 5, and 6 are terrible. The issue that they have specifically is that under pressure, they just retract themselves, and then they hope that everything can come right and they can hit themselves out of that trouble later, and that their bowling is better than other teams. I just haven't seen enough that tells me that that is going to happen for 2 more games. Now, it could, because they have kind of everything they need other than a number 7. Like Marco Jansen would be such a great number 8. Be a fantastic number 8 that you would probably even float up the order when you lose a wicket in the 17th over. But the way they bat tells me that not a single person in that top 6 thinks he's a number 7.
Yeah, and I mean, it is really staggering how they've had so much success with that, what would I say, not as deep of a batting order, right? But I tell you what, Jared, if they can field the way they fielded in that England game, I know Klaasen dropped a catch, but there was some spectacular fielding efforts, right? Riza's catch, Markram's catch towards the end. Even England, I remember how Butler literally inspired the whole team when he caught that flying take to dismiss de Kock behind the stumps and then ran Klaasen out. Sam Curran took an amazing catch after that. That was like high quality cricket. That game was probably my favorite one of this entire T20 World Cup, because you saw 2 teams going at each other, 2 teams who did not understand the conditions, did not know how much runs they needed. And then ultimately South Africa defended 163, right? So I feel like they'll have to go and look back at that game in particular, look at how well they did in the field. And even when they kind of bottled it after those full tosses, right? When Bartman kind of, pretty much, screwed over the game, they defended 25 runs in the last 3 overs.
Yeah.
And I think that is the game which they need to look back at and be like, if we can at least be like that South Africa in the field, we've got a chance of lifting the cup.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? And so I was chatting to one of my friends the other day, it might have been my friend Jake, who's a trader, and we were talking about this, where it's like, they actually have choked a lot in this tournament, but they haven't lost a game.
Yeah.
So there's 2 ways of looking at it, which is basically where we started with this. It's either they have gotten over that and they understand now that in World Cup games, there are going to be times when they're in front and then they're behind and then they have to work their way back in front again, which is basically how Australia play in World Cups, right? Australia doesn't, even you're watching Australia today, even when Tim David was out there and he hit that 6 and you think, they still think they can win this, right? And they were massively behind with Bumrah still with balls to bowl. If they can get themselves into that, if that's the mindset that they're in, that's huge. I still think they have deficiencies and issues, but that's huge if they can get into that. But the other way of looking at it is that they have been shaky in every single game, and against teams that they are much better at, have kept letting those teams get back in front of them or pull back into the game. If it's that South Africa, then I don't think they even make it to the final, no matter who they play.
I mean, Australia were really shaky and scrappy in the ODI World Cup, and then they made it to the finals. So maybe South Africa have a similar sort of arc loading. I sure hope so. I want them to get this ICC World Cup monkey off their backs. But anyway, we've spoken enough about them. Let's move on to England. And they did lose that thriller to South Africa, of course. But they seem to have found their feet somewhat. And in the batting department in particular, Jos Buttler obliterated the USA. He smashed an unbeaten 83 of 39 deliveries. He smashed, whacked Harmeet Singh for 5 consecutive 6s. Someone at the Kennington Oval, after this World Cup is done, is going to have to take a wide look at those solar panels, because I feel like a lot of money has been wasted over there.
I hope they're sponsored.
Yeah, I really do. But it's not just been Butler, right? I mean, we saw versus the West Indies, Phil Salt. He scored 87 not out of 47 deliveries. And Johnny Bairstow as well scored 48 not out of 26. In that same game, Phil Salt smashed 30 in an over off Romario Shepherd. So he went bang, bang, bang. And then Harry Brook in that South Africa game. Sure, they lost that game, but his 53 was a really valuable knock. It could have won England that fixture.
Livingston as well.
Yeah, Livingston also did really well in that game. So I feel like England, little closer to being back to white hot England. And I think that is a good sign. They'll just have to pray to the, rain gods that let there be no precipitation in Guyana, because pound for pound, I do think they are going to give India a proper run for their money. And I'd say that's a 50-50 game at this point, if it goes through.
The thing about that game is that the pitch obviously helps India in that it's going to spin. And I don't think England have played spin very well for a long time. Yeah. So that's a huge advantage for India. The advantage for England is that is going to be a low scoring game and it is going to be close. And England have won World Cups. And all we've just said about South Africa, it's almost the opposite for England. They're not like Australia or anything, but they play in a way it's just like, well, we're going to throw it all out there and we're going to see what the opposition do. And I expect them to play very similar. Doesn't mean that India can't find ways to slow them down and cause pressure in other ways. But I just expect England to be like, no, we're going to try and hit as many 4s and 6s as possible. And in a low-scoring game, if you can hit a bunch of 6s, it changes things very, very quickly. So it's an interesting game from that point of view. I think you are right. I think they look better than they did at the start of the tournament. I think they probably... I didn't bet in that game because I was driving somewhere, but I watched the first innings and I was positive South Africa were going to win that game. And it was nothing to do with England. I just thought that the wicket had started to change and that it was going to be very hard to score in that second innings. I think whoever batted first in that one, and part of it was that it took England so long to work out how to bowl. And whereas I thought, well, South Africa's just going to watch what England has just done and just bowl slow balls from the start, which is going to be very, very difficult to play. And that was pretty much the difference between the two teams in the end. So yeah, the West Indies game was very, very good. USA game, I never thought USA had anything that would challenge England, so I'm not too worried about that. But they do seem to have hit a little bit of form, a little bit more confident at this stage. It's just how the matchup is going to go for them, right? Their spin bowling isn't, if you look at it, South Africa have two really high quality spinners who, they could trust. England has one.
Yeah, and then, but that one high-quality spinner is having the tournament of his life, right? In the Super 8 stage, Adil Rashid has returned figures of 5 for 54 in 12 overs. 2 for 13 versus the USA, 1 for 20 versus South Africa, and 1 for 21 versus the West Indies. His googlies have been absolutely unplayable, and he's pretty much rolled back the clock. I know he's like the #1 ranked bowler in T20Is, but you and I can both agree that peak Adil Rashid was around that 2019 period. This guy is doing as well as that guy did, and given that this game is in Guyana, the semi-final, and if there is no rain, he is England's trump card. There is Livingston. He did well in that last game, took 1 for 21 or 1 for 24 versus the USA. But again, he's Liam Livingston. And Moeen Ali also. These guys are decent part-timers, not great second spinners. So a lot of the responsibility is, on Adil Rashid to kind of win England that game.
Adil Rashid in 12 T20 internationals against India has 8 wickets, an average of 37.6 and an economy of 7.52 in India. So in spinning conditions, wait, that's versus India, wasn't it? Wait a minute, Why does that say? I said 12 games, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
Why is that saying now 14 games? Oh, in India altogether. So this isn't just against India, of course, but in India,
okay,
he had an average of 35 and 8.2. So I don't know how many of those would just be against India. Let me try and work that out. Yeah, so it's got hit quite a few times in India by the Indians when he's bowled against them, right? At home and away. He doesn't usually have this kind of impact against India, is what I would say. And it's because he is a little bit slower through the air. And what he does brilliantly against other batters is really slows it down on wickets like this. I just don't know if that's going to work against Indian batters who have faster feet. Right? It's as simple as that with him. It's not that I don't think he's a brilliant bowler, but my issue isn't Adil Rashid, because I think he's completely within the realms of possibility for him to get 1 for 24. What's the next 4 overs of spin going to be like? And I'll take it further. What's the next 6 overs of spin going to be like? Right?
True.
If they need to bowl 10 overs of spin against India, what do those other ones go? So you could say that you would rather have Adil Rashid than Shamsi or Maharaj, right? Which I think is a perfectly reasonable thing to say.
Yeah.
But that 8 overs is so much higher than the 8 overs you're going to get on the other side, right?
agree.
And it's a bit the same with with Agar. So Australia and England's big problem is the secondary spinner. And sometimes you get away with Maxwell, and there are all these different ways of getting away with it. And then you play India, and the pressure is a little bit higher. And when you are bowling to Shivam Dubé, right, and he's literally in the side to try and whack you for 6, and you're a part timer, things are so different at that point. And Will Jackson and Moeen Ali, both fine bowlers, I think are going to have some issues when it comes to that. Now, there are other ways that England can put pressure on. And if you're a clever fast bowler in Guyana, you are almost just as effective at times as you are. If you can keep the stumps in play every ball in Guyana, good luck trying to hit the ball across the line. Little things like this that you could do, slower balls and bowling wide and everything else. There's other things, but it's tricky for England. And I think it really is that drop off that I worry about. But more importantly, I just think India is going to play Adil Rashid better than England is going to play any of the Indian spinners. And that might be the other big thing, right, of how this game plays out. None of that matters if Phil Salt is 80 off 30 balls and just goes absolutely nuts. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't matter as much. But if that doesn't happen and it's a dogfight, then it gets really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Adil Rashid might be at another level right now, but overall, if you look at their spin bowling resources, they're not quite up to par. And India do play Adil Rashid really well. Varun in the comments is telling us that he averages 39 versus India in India. So there's that.
There we go.
But at least England have got their pace bowling department nailed down. Chris Jordan was brought back into the team for the USA game in Barbados, which is his hometown as well. Took a hat-trick, the third hat-trick hero, or well, the second hat-trick hero, but third hat-trick of the T20 World Cup, ended with 4 for 10 to his name. And, I feel like his cutters, could be, very helpful in Guyana, right?
Yeah.
If that
he
game
bowls
is
at the stumps. He could be a really good bowler there because he bowls at the stumps, yeah.
Yes, so I think he is a plus. And maybe after Adil Rashid, he might be the most important bowler for England. Sam Curran is in the team for those cutters as well. Not sure if he can execute them to perfection or not. But, Reece Topley with the new ball has been frugal. He was really frugal with South Africa, gave away just 23 runs. And then Jofra has been hot and cold. Now the England game, the South Africa game is a perfect example of that. His figures read 3 for 40, but his first over went for 22. Next 3 overs, he bowled really well. His slower ones were perfect, right? He took 3 for 18 in 3 overs. But that first over kind of cost him and England. But I'm quite sure that these are the 3 England are going in with, because Mark Wood does not seem like a good option in Guyana. So perhaps if this game does play out, maybe as a pace bowling unit, England are slightly better than India, because India is just Bumrah, and then you've got Arshdeep and Hardik, kind of like partner him.
Yeah, if they were playing anywhere other than Guyana, I would be more excited about that. Guyana is just such a particular kind of pitch. And as I said, it's not as if pace bowlers don't always do well there, because kind of no one makes runs in Guyana. It doesn't really matter what you bowl. Whatever your deliveries are, they usually do quite well. But really good spinners in Guyana are just so important. But yeah, Chris Jordan could be quite interesting. I don't think, though, England have a Pat Cummins. I'm trying to think of someone else that would be good there. Someone like Daniel Sams, or, a real, like, out-and-out cutter bowler, which would be, if England had Harshal Patel in their squad at the moment, I think that would be really, really interesting. Someone like that would be quite handy. But outside of that, I think they're just going to have to bowl at the stumps and hope that works for them, and hope that the second/third spinner doesn't get whacked too much.
Yeah, let's see if we get a game, and I really hope we do, because I don't want a semi-final of the World Cup to get washed out. But fingers crossed on that one. Let's shift our focus to Afghanistan now, and they are in pole position to qualify for the semi-finals. They have fate in their own hands. They just need to defeat Bangladesh in a few hours to seal their maiden semi-final berth in the history of T20 World Cups. Rahmanullah Gurbaz, along with his opening partner Ibrahim Zadran, they scored 60 and 51 respectively versus Australia, and they're both amongst the top 5 run scorers in this current edition of the T20 World Cup, as things stand. Granted, Australia missed a few opportunities, whatever. That opening partnership was 95 balls, right? And they were, picking their battles really, really wisely. I felt like they played those Kingstown conditions to perfection. And The win predictor really did not know what was happening in that game. It had Australia at 75% when Australia had to chase down 149 in the second innings. And I was like, are you for real? Afghanistan have done more than enough. I thought they could have defended 130 odd. I tweeted that. And they did bowl Australia out for 127. That is probably their biggest victory ever in a World Cup, both formats, because, they've got a little beef with Australia as well.
Yeah, look, it's fantastic for them to finally beat Australia, and more importantly, it gives them another chance of going to a semi-final. Worst case scenario, Afghanistan have put themselves in a position to be in World Cup semi-finals, 2 World Cups in a row, right? Worst case scenario. Best case scenario is that they do make it to a semi-final, and then they have a very good chance of making it through to a final. I think they're a better ODI cricket team than they are a T20 team. I think the conditions have been in their favour. Yeah. Their 2 openers have made 57.8% of their runs. Yep, I don't know if I've ever seen a run like this ever. The only one I can remember is the 2012 World Cup, where Shane Watson made like 250 or 260 runs and basically made all the runs for Australia. And then they got to the semi-final and he failed and they lost. And that's my big worry for them, is that their openers can't continue to make runs the way that they are. And they're going to have to do it 2 more games to win. 3 more games to win the World Cup. 1 more game to make the World Cup semi-final at least. That's where I worry about them a little bit, because, openers eventually fail, right? They eventually nick off. They eventually get one that swings a little bit too much. And, that's why openers are openers. That's their lot in life, is to occasionally go out early. And so I worry about all those things for them. They also can't bat. They not only do they need to pitch in their favor, they also need to bat first. So I think in this World Cup at the moment, they're averaging 28 runs per wicket when they bat first, and they're averaging 15 runs per wicket when they bat second. And if you look at their last year, it's pretty much the same. And I think both of those openers are a big reason of that. They also prefer that. So there's so many little things that can go wrong, and we've seen that at times. We've also seen that when they play on a more even surface, suddenly they don't look like a special team as much anymore. But when they play on any surface that's in their wheelhouse, and the opposition are batting second against them, they look absolutely magnificent. Their seam bowlers, and I'll include Gulbadine, who's come from nowhere to win that last game with the ball. But their seam bowlers, certainly their 2 new ball bowlers. I thought there were times when Naveen wasn't bowling his best. I thought he was fantastic against Australia and could have got about 5 wickets in the power play with some of those deliveries. There was one that Travis Head looked up at David Warner. Is that the one you're going to say?
Yeah, the first delivery was almost the perfect delivery, and then the third delivery was the perfect delivery. I think when he cleaned up Head, for me, that is the delivery of the T20 World Cup thus far. And
I don't think it was as good as the one where he didn't get Head out earlier, because that's unplayable. And Fazal Haq obviously carried the load early on, so those guys have done well. Noor Ahmed hasn't quite worked, but Mohammad Nabi is made for these wickets, right? So he's been able to step up. I forgot the name of the left arm finger spinner. He got hit in against by Maxwell, but he can do a job. They've and Omazai hasn't needed to bowl all that much, but we know that if they need, Omazai can take the new ball. They've got so many kinds of different options available to them. But I just think that they need kind of everything to be right for them to be able to win a game. And at the moment, you would have to say that these things are going in the right direction for them, right? Like it's definitely happening the way that they would want it to at the moment. So from that perspective, that the playing this next game in St. Vincent, it probably doesn't favour them any more than it favours Bangladesh. And they're really a similar team to Bangladesh. So we will know at the end of this, by the time most of you have listened to this show, you will know what the result of that is. But either way, this is already a success for Afghanistan, and they should take it as that. And it looks like they've unlocked another level.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of things over there. Of course, they are heavily reliant on their opening pair, in the batting department. And of course, this is a team which is, significantly better when it bats first. And these conditions that they're getting to play in the West Indies are literally made for them. But all things considered, all of those people who might have predicted an upset versus, or I wouldn't even call it an upset, who might have predicted Afghanistan defeating Australia in Kingstown, none of them would have predicted Gulbuddin Naib taking 4 of 20. I will not buy that. No one would have seen that coming.
And if they did, I don't want to meet that person.
But yeah, happy for the youngster Gulbuddin and his big guns. He took a catch as well. I think Naveen's spell was fantastic. His 3 for 20 was right up there with one of the spells of the tournament. Rashid Khan wasn't at his best versus Australia. Took 1 for 23, but versus India, he took 3 for 26. And in that India game, it was just him who was keeping Afghanistan in contention. Fazal Faruqi, I believe, is still the leading wicket taker of the T20 World Cup at 15 wickets. Took 3 for 33 versus India. When I look at that bowling attack, and when I look at Bangladesh's batting, order, and the way they kind of go about their business, I feel like Afghanistan should be winning this game. But then again, Bangladesh on their day can turn up. They've got the likes of Tawheed Hridoy, who has been impressive since a while now, and people have finally come to notice him in this T20 World Cup. One of their stars has been Rishad Hussain. He might be their future franchise T20 cricketer, bowls leg spin and has a very nice open stance, can whack the ball a long way. And then Tanzim Hassan Saqib, deceptively quick, has had a really good World Cup. The Fizz is around, right? The opener Tanzid isn't bad either, and Shanto is there, of course, right? So it's going to be a great game. Bangladesh still, are not out of it mathematically, but even if they don't get to the semi-finals, which they probably won't, they still have a fair few positives from this T20 World Cup, and we don't always say that for them after this sort of an event.
No, I mean, they've been magnificent bowling. They've bowled pretty much the way that we thought Sri Lanka would bowl, right? And Sri Lanka didn't just, had a nightmare tournament. And so Bangladesh have done that. But they haven't found 2 batters, really.
Yes.
Who can put any, and Afghanistan have only found 2. And that's probably the difference between those 2 sides at the end of the day.
Mohammad Assam, our friend from Cricinfo, he was very critical of Bangladesh's mentality and approach. He kept calling them timid, like, why are you not batting first versus India? Why have you dropped one of your strike bowlers in Taskeen and brought in an extra batter? What's up with that selection? And he said that they were just going for a respectable loss towards the end. These are all things that do hamper Bangladesh's progress as a limited overs cricketing nation, don't they?
Yeah, I think getting past that bit where you try and play for respectable losses is almost the most important thing in World Cups. And Afghanistan have jumped it, right? And Bangladesh just haven't. Now, we know that when they're playing really well, they back themselves. That's fine. But that's not when that's important. When that is important is, the game against South Africa. Some of those other games that they put themselves in great positions and just didn't go anywhere from. They do look like they are playing for respectable games rather than for wins at the moment. But to be honest, if they had batters, maybe that wouldn't be. Do you know what I mean? Maybe it's as simple as that. They just don't have the batting, and so they know that, and we're being unfair by actually expecting better from them. I don't know what the full thing is there. But as I said before, I don't think they're that much different than Afghanistan. I would actually say that their bowling attack has probably worked better than Afghanistan's in this tournament. It's just that Afghanistan have been able to match it up with 2 guys who can get them decent scores, and they haven't managed to do that in Bangladesh at all.
The one battle I'm looking forward to in this upcoming game is Tawheed Hridoy versus Rashid Khan, because we saw what Hridoy did to Hasaranga, 3 consecutive sixes. But one last point on Afghanistan. They dropped plenty versus the West Indies in that last group game. Naveen ul Haq dropped Rishabh Pant in the India game. But then, they were terrific versus Australia. They were spotless. Mohammad Nabi looked as cool as a cucumber. And he, by the way, has now defeated 45 different teams in T20 internationals, which is hilarious. From Division 5 to right up to this stage where Afghanistan are vying for a semi-final position.
Jersey and Australia he's beaten, right?
He has.
I would assume no other cricketer has ever beaten Jersey and Australia. I'm trying to think of someone who might have. Because, I can't think of another team that would have ever played Jersey and Australia. And there might be someone else that I haven't thought of. But do you know what I mean? Like, it's not just the 45, it's the breadth of the 45, which is absolutely incredible. What a performer he's been over a long period of time. And this is one of those things where he's probably past his best, and we all kind of know that. He's probably been past his best for 8 years, right? Yeah. But in these conditions, he's just a fantastic T20 player, and he really is a glue guy because of his ability to do so many things for your team at any one stage. He can be a frontline bowler or he can be a frontline batter. And he's not consistently either of those roles. But the fact that in certain situations he can be those just tells you it's just such an important guy to have around.
I feel like he has this calming presence, right? And this team needs that. They're high on adrenaline. You saw the celebrations, and I get them. I mean, they should be celebrating that hard. But I feel like Afghanistan have been galvanized, and at least for this game versus Bangladesh, my prediction would be that they'll go through. But anyway, we've spent too much time on these teams. Let's go to the West Indies, the home team. They have been knocked out of this T20 World Cup. And, you know, apart from Nicholas Pooran's 98 versus Afghanistan, which was amazing, right? Shea Hope's unbeaten 82 of 39 versus the USA, again, a fantastic batting effort. There's not much else to write home about this. Roston Chase scored a 50 in this previous game versus South Africa, but he also got dropped. And I see a lot of blitzy 20s and 30s, particularly in that England game, you know, when the West Indies played them. But they got to 180, and 180 was never going to be enough versus England on that sort of surface. And yeah, Chase has exceeded expectations. Brandon King was doing well, and then he got injured, unfortunately. But him getting injured isn't the reason why West Indies' batting failed. I just feel like they had all of that firepower, and none of it kind of came together at the right time. And ultimately, it's the batting failure that cost them.
Yeah, probably. I mean, Rutherford and Pooran probably won them 2 games that they shouldn't have won, right, on their own.
The New Zealand one, Rutherford won that.
Yeah. And what was the other one that Pooran went nuts in?
Afghanistan.
Yeah. So there's 2 games that realistically were won by individual performances. One of which out of nowhere, and the other one just was just too many runs, right?
Yeah.
But I do think their biggest issue was probably in the end that Gudakesh Modi didn't have the kind of tournament that he should have had. If he bowled as well as I know he can bowl, and certainly flirted with bowling that well at times, they're a legit chance of going all the way, and he just wasn't at that level because they got performances out of Andre Russell, Azari Joseph, and obviously Akil Hassan. So they got 3 other bowling performances, which I would say in all 3 cases exceeded their expectations.
You're forgetting Roston Chase over here. 3 for 12 versus South Africa and 3 for 19 versus the USA.
Yeah,
who would have thought he would perform?
But that's, I kind of expect him to perform occasionally just because he's a finger spinner who's tall and on those sorts of pitches. But yeah, you know, there was a couple of other games where he was a bit ropey as well, which is fine because he's not quite a frontline bowler. But yeah, you could throw him in as exceeding expectations at times. But I kind of figured that on those sorts of pitches, he would be good. Gudakesh Modi should have been unplayable on some of the pitches that they were on.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't. And when they really needed him against England to rip the ball, he was sliding it through. When they really needed him to have an impact against South Africa, he didn't have an impact. And those are the 2 games. Hey?
In that one over. Klaasen ripped him apart.
Yep. Those are the 2 games where he had to be what I think he probably is, which is, you know, one of the best left-arm finger spinners in the world, on home conditions, in pitches that suit him, should at the very least be able to control it. He looked nervous against England, and he was darting the ball in. And against Heinrich Klaasen, he just let Heinrich Klaasen dictate to him too easily. He has one game that he can play in either of those. He could have really made a mess of England. It certainly made that 180 look a lot more defendable. And against South Africa, if he bowls the way that Gudakesh Modi can bowl, they win that game, right? And they're going through. Now, it's a lot of pressure to put on a guy who's new to international cricket and everywhere else. But these are his conditions, and he's a fantastic bowler. I cannot push how good a bowler this guy is anymore. And he just didn't stand up. And they got so many good performances out of other people who weren't as good as him. And you put that together with, as you said, the sort of stringy batting that they had. And it just wasn't enough. I never thought they were a genuine contender. But I also never thought that I'd be sitting here saying that Moti was their problem.
That's true. And I mean, if Roston Chase was their most incisive spinner in the Super 8s, then that is a bit of a problem. Akil Hussain had a brilliant, group stage run of form. He was taking a lot of wickets, but come Super 8s, he was frugal. Didn't give away much runs at all, but he couldn't quite, strike with the ball, couldn't take enough wickets. And Gudakesh Moti was, I suppose, not so Gudakesh Moti in the Super 8s. Had a bit of a stinker over there, which is disappointing because I really like him as well. And he has done well in the CPL for so many years. He's not a youngster by any means. He's an experienced guy at domestic level. Even Dre Russ, right? I know he was fantastic with the ball. Even in the Super 8s, you look at his performance yesterday. Oh, yes, it is yesterday now. 2 for 19 versus South Africa. Got those 2 wickets in his first over in the power play, which was important. And then he also had 3 for 31 versus the USA. But with the bat, there were flashes of brilliance. We saw how long he could hit the ball. But he didn't really hang around for long out there. And I feel like what we know of Dre Russ as being like this explosive, game-changing monster, that guy went missing in the World Cup.
Yeah, I find it very hard to blame a number 6, number 7 batter for the issues that they had. I mean, you're not wrong, but he should be a cherry on the top, really. And that wasn't what his role was in this tournament at times. So he bowled better than he should have, and he batted worse than he should have. Like they got that last bit of juice out of his knees, if we're being honest, and they didn't get there in the end.
Yeah, fair enough. Also, some of the wicket keeping by Nicholas Pooran was horrendous in that England game. He dropped Salt, he dropped Moeen, he missed a run out. They also dropped a couple of catches here and there other than that. But overall, I think West Indies wasn't cut out for a semi-final spot compared to the other 2 big teams in this Super 8 group, right? I would take England and South Africa over them. I felt like on their day, they had it in them to beat anyone, but ultimately, just didn't come through. Last team that we need to discuss is the USA. Now, they got whooped by England and the West Indies, but hey, they ran South Africa deep. Andres Hoos scored an unbeaten 80 of 47, and that too versus the nation of his birth. Nice little subplot over there, albeit in vain. And then Harmeet Singh, he took 2 for 24 in the same game, and with the bat, he was playing a fantastic cameo. The USA required 28 runs off the last 2 overs. It was very much possible, and that is when Harmeet holed out on a full toss, and it all went downhill. But overall, as a unit, they far exceeded all expectations, and they have so much to take away from this tournament.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they go away pretty excited by everything that happened with them in this tournament. They can't bowl.
Barring Netravalkar, okay? He was a superstar in the group stages.
Yeah. I've seen him bowl a lot, though. I think he bowled better this time than I've ever seen him before. Ali Khan bowled worse than probably we all expected him to bowl. So he really was unfortunate for them, but they can bat. And when I was working with Major League Cricket, that was what I was telling teams of. Don't worry about the batting. There's batting in America. What you really want to make sure is you have attacking spinners and that you have fast bowlers. Those are the 2 things they don't have. That's ultimately what cost them on the better wickets when they got to the West Indies, was the fact that they couldn't really control anyone's scoring rate at any stage. We know, though, they can hit sixes, and they bat quite deep, and they have some good hitting available to them and everything else. But yeah, it's just they're so one-sided as a batting team, them and Canada really. Whereas quite a few of the other associate teams are bowling teams, but that's something they've got to work on going ahead. I don't think the answer is Corey Anderson at the death, but we have to ask RCB fans what they think about that.
Varun is saying in the comments that Netravalkar is actually a below-par bowler according to True Values. Hey, he got his ass handed to him in those England and West Indies games, but he took 2 for 21 versus South Africa, and I am rooting for my man to get an IPL gig. I just want that to happen for him. Or even if that doesn't happen, he's got a job at Oracle. So it doesn't matter, right?
Look, he might be a franchise level. Yeah, he might be a franchise level cricketer. I don't think he's better than, let's say, Oman's Bilal Khan or some of the Scottish players, right? Yeah. He's not as good as Paul Van Meekeren or someone like that. But he's a good bowler. But he would have to take 3 wickets every game for them to be a consistent team with the rest of their bowling. Harmeet, real defensive bowler. Stephen Taylor, if he's having to bowl, you've really got some issues. There's some real sort of patchy bowling throughout. What's his name? Jasprit Singh.
Jasdeep. He gave away 28 runs in the power play in a single over versus Quinton de Kock. Take that over out, you never know what the result of that game's going to be.
And he can take wickets. The thing is, he's not a bad bowler. It's just that he's going to go to about 10 runs and over in every game, and you hope that he takes 2 or 3 wickets with it. And that's a real issue with his bowling. So, look, they've overachieved. It's great for USA cricket. It's a shame they didn't beat South Africa just because that would have been a great way to sort of end for them. But no one expected them to be where they were. So fantastic that they made it that far.
Absolutely, I concur. And that ends our T20 World Cup roundup. Just some quick notes on women's cricket. We have some series ongoing, and India defeated South Africa 3-0 in the ODI series at home. And Smriti Mandhana scored 343 runs in 3 games, 117 in the first, 136 in the second off just 120 deliveries. And in the final ODI, she scored 90 off 83 as well. Complete and utter domination.
Yeah, I mean, she's a fantastic player. South Africa's going through a bit of a weird period with their cricket at the moment. I didn't see any of it, so I haven't been able to have a look at it. I mean, obviously by October, we'll only be talking about women's cricket, but at the moment, it's quite far down. I occasionally see highlights of women's cricket, and I occasionally see someone take a catch out of their ass in the blast. That's about all I'm seeing outside the World Cup at the moment.
Yeah, I'll tell you what happened in the second ODI, though. It was wild, right? Smriti, of course, scored 136, and then Harmanpreet scored a ton as well. And India had put on 325 runs in the first innings. South Africa, in response, nearly chased it down. They scored 321. In fact, they needed 6 runs off the last 4 deliveries, but then 2 wickets fell. Laura Wolvaardt scored 114 off 94. Oh, sorry, that was Marizan Kapp who scored 114 off 94. Laura Wolvaardt scored an unbeaten run ball 135. I believe this was the highest scoring women's ODI of all time. Hypocost, if you're in the comments, please confirm. But it was an all-time classic. Like, I remember I was at work in my E11 office in Pro Sports, and we had like multiple games on. It was pretty crazy. And Hypocost does have a stat for us, but he says Mandhana's 343 runs are the most scored in a 3-match women's ODI series, breaking the record of 342 jointly held by Tammy Beaumont and Melly Kerr. So yeah, that game on its own was theatre. It was box office. You missed out.
I mean, I only have so many eyes to be able to watch all that. But yeah, that sounds like a fun game, if we're being honest.
Yeah, it was. And in other news, over in Sri Lanka, the home team, they whitewashed the West Indies 3-0 in the ODI series. And they also won the first T20. So Chamari scored 91 in the third ODI. But there is this new batting sensation in Sri Lanka's ranks. Her name is Vishmi Garunaratne. She's an opening batter. She was player of the series in the ODI series. 40 in the first game, 50 in the second, and 44 in the third. And then she also scored 35 of 25 in the T20I. She's just 18 years of age, Jared. And I bet that Estelle is excited about her.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, she hasn't even turned... She's... 18. Wow, born in 2005. Cricket is getting very young. I mean, she's played a bit of international cricket already as well. Like, it wasn't like that's her first games, because she averages 20 in ODIs over 15 games and 21 in T20s as well. So maybe she's just, worked out international cricket a little bit more. She'll be a fascinating one to watch. Or whether this is just a one-off thing because she matched up well with the West Indian attack.
Yeah, I mean, Sri Lanka were all over the West Indies and continue to be, and they've had lots of success in the recent past. So I'm looking at a very nice trajectory for this team, even post Chamari Atapattu. Hypocost has confirmed in the comments that this was the second highest scoring women's ODI of all time. It was the first to feature 4 centuries and the first to have a century scored from a number 4 or lower batter in both innings. Well, those are some fantastic stats. Thank you, Hypocost. And that kind of wraps up all of our talking points for overthrows. Let's go to the super chats real quick, and then we can wrap this up. All right, who's up first? I believe it's Path, right winger. Oh no, it's Vedant Khanzode. Excuse me if I've butchered your name over there. He says, which opening pair plays for you? Options: Rohit Head or Kohli Warner. Rohit Head, of course, Rohit Head.
What was the second one? Kohli Warner. Yeah,
Kohli
everyone's
Warner.
going Rohit Head, aren't they? I mean, Head's the one that you would want at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, if you're looking at current form and everything, and Rohit just scored 92 or 41, so Rohit is the only right answer. Anyone who goes with Kohli Warner, I'm judging you guys. All right, Dhruv Raman Singh with the next one. How much of batting is pure natural talent and most kids doing nets are just wasting time trying to reach a level their reaction times don't allow? I mean, practice makes perfect.
Well, there are certain things you can't teach. And at the moment, one of them is the ability to saccade your eyes, which is basically what top level batters do. So they read the ball in the first 3 meters of it being released and they make the decision from there. No one can do that. So if you can't face 85-mile-an-hour bowling or 80-mile-an-hour bowling at the lower level, there's nothing you can do to train yourself to be able to do that, right? But the opposite is also true. If you can do that and your batting isn't as good as other people of that level, that ability can go up and down. So it's really up to that. If you can face that ball at that pace, and it has to be from a bowler, it can't be from a bowling machine, and you have the tools to be able to do that. And it works with spin as well. It's just that it's easier to test it with pace than it is with spin. But it's about that. It's not really about reaction times, because most of the best batters of all time do not have better reaction times than anyone else. What they have is that they already know what is coming, which is a far better thing than reactions.
Yeah. Tell you what, Dhruv, talent can only get you so far. Umar Akmal was pure talent, but he didn't work hard in the nets, and you can look at what happened to his career. Anyway, let's move on. San K says or asks, I was super critical of Maharaj, even thinking of fixing. All right, then San K, that's a bit extreme. He says, going for 6 instead of knocking it around versus Chase yesterday. Is it justified?
I don't think so. Is it? I mean,
there weren't a lot of runs left, right?
I don't know how good Maharaj is. Like, I know he can hold the bat, but I mean, I've never looked to see if he's good against off spin. But having seen him play against pace, I would say he's probably better against spin than he is against pace. Yeah. He probably saw that as a
hard to get out, right? That's what I know Maharaj as a batter.
But my point is, if that's his shot and he's like, I think I can hit this part-time spinner for 6, and then he can win the game, that's kind of what you want from T20 cricketers, isn't it? So this is one of those things that comes down to how you are reading the game. And also, the other very important thing is he is not a specialist batter, right? So if you are upset with a non-specialist batter making a bad decision, okay, I'm very upset with you, San K, when you try and be a surgeon and you're not a surgeon.
Fair enough. Palash Sasidharan with the next super chat says, who is more likely to choke, India or South Africa in the final? I mean, South Africa have choked in this tournament and have won all the games. India looking more attacking outfit than they've ever looked like before. I think that's but that question is in poor taste. Let's just say that.
I don't think it's in poor taste. I mean, it's just a fan's question. I get what you mean, though. Yeah. The whole choking thing, I've talked about a lot before. There are generally reasons why these teams haven't won. And I don't think it's necessarily choking. I think it's to do with the style of which they play. And that could bite either of these sides. I think India is right at the moment, far more likely to lose from over-attacking. And I think South Africa is far more likely to lose at the moment from under-attacking. Either of those teams lose, or if both of them lose, they're both going to be called choking, even if that is not the case.
Yeah, that's the main takeaway over here. People are going to call it a choke either way, regardless of how the game goes. Superb Paul Singh, a very generous donation. Thank you, Superb Paul. He says, love the show, especially the crick picks, and I think you missed Gulbadin's celebration, him pumping his biceps. What happens if the semi-final game gets washed out? For the first one, South Africa versus whoever, there will be a reserve day. Yep. For the second one in Guyana, India versus England, if it gets washed out, India goes through because they are the number 1 team and England are number 2 from their respective Super 8 groups. Sydney Cockman says, do you think the US over or underperformed, or did they perform as expected? I mean, we kind of answered this, but Jared can quickly summarize.
I can't see how they underperformed. Like, who had them as a Super 8s team, for fuck's sake? So no, they definitely overperformed. I mean, oh my God. They almost lost the first game to Canada.
Yeah. Crazy. UM123 says, Mitch Marsh, Bangladesh. He's he's basically implying that Mitch Marsh right now is a Bangladesh fan. So yeah, of course he is.
I suppose they
100%.
are. I suppose they'll watch that game late tonight. Probably go to the hotel together, knowing how teams usually do that sort of stuff. Or sorry, stay in the team room. They'll have some sort of projector or big screen TVs available to them somewhere, or watch it in rooms together. However they do it. Most teams have a team room at a hotel where they hang out. It'll be something like that, and they'll be watching it. And yeah, they will be hoping that they win that game. That's what most people would do.
They'll have like a 12-pack of beers right by them, regardless of the result, because they'll need it either way. Path Right Winger says, saw the Bumrah video, always felt great bowlers get away with more bad balls. In India versus Pakistan match, Rizwan was nudging the ball when Hardik and Ashdeep were bowling. It was out of character for him to then slog Bumrah. Was it machismo against the intimidation of Bumrah, or was the shot on due to field placement? Sick of Desi saying it was nefarious. It was stupid. You see off Bumrah's first delivery of a fresh spell. That's what it was.
Yeah, it was a length ball that was straight. It's very possible he just saw that and thought to himself, well, that's not a very good ball. I can whip that away and get my runs here. It was a poor shot, wasn't executed well. Bumrah has a way of frazzling people. We just saw the Gurba's dismissal, right? It's a wide half volley, and he played a ridiculous shot off that. You know, he's miles away from that ball. So I think, you know, Bumrah has a penchant from that. You know, but one of the things we talked about in that video, and we're doing our foot marks on it next, is that the threat of Bumrah is so big. Right?
Yes.
That is such a big deal. And I don't think people quite understand that you have to change. And Rashid Khan and Sunil Narayan, a lot of these guys have a similar impact. That sometimes you make mistakes against them because you are worried about how you have to handle them rather than just facing each ball as they come.
100% agree with that. Iceman11 says, why not eliminate bilateral ODIs, which often lack significance, and introduce an annual Champions Trophy style tournament? The top eight ranked teams could participate in a league format, while teams.
I couldn't find the other one. But why won't they do that? Doing a Champions Trophy every year, we would run out of time. We already don't have enough time for the stuff that we're doing at the moment. We could. The reason they don't eliminate bilateral ODIs is they're still making money for people. But as we've talked about before, they are definitely on their way out.
Absolutely. We've done like a foot marks on this as well, so you can go check that out, Iceman. I'm quite sure we have. UM123 with the final super chat of overthrows says, I don't understand the criticism towards Azam Khan. I think he's a wonderful batter. He just needs a good coach who can advise him to take retirement. All right. Okay. That was lots of sarcasm over there.
He took you on a journey then, didn't he?
He did take me on a journey.
I think sometimes we see a player play 2 or 3 games in a World Cup and they fail, and everyone's just decided that means that they're no good. He's a number 5, number 6 player? They can go through whole tournaments without making runs. And we overemphasize that and everything else. He clearly wasn't informed. He wasn't seeing the ball well in this tournament. Yeah. We know that from his wicket keeping, where he didn't even look like he was watching it when he was wicket keeping.
That's true.
There was nothing in what I saw in that where I was like, well, Azam Khan can never play for Pakistan again. All I saw was a player tragically out of form, and they dropped him, and it didn't matter because they were already out of the tournament by that stage. And sometimes those sorts of things happen. He wasn't the reason that Pakistan went home early. I can promise you that.
100%. And I feel like, you know, Azam's fitness is always going to be an area which is going to be heavily covered by the media. So the one lapse that he makes, everyone's going to start saying that it's because of his fitness. It comes with the territory, kind of.
And, you know, I've talked about this a lot before of, you know, that is part of it. If you are overweight and you say, well, I can still play at the elite level, right? And you are performing, very rarely does anyone have any questions about your weight, right? But the minute you're not overweight, you have a question. And it's not just about being overweight, right? It's the same with a specialist bowler or a specialist batter who can't field or bat or do the opposite skill. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anytime there's a weakness in your game that is always there, if the strong parts of your game aren't carrying it, people are going to go back to whatever that weakness may be. Yes. And, you know, we have seen many cricketers who are large who have done very, very well. But there's also the fact that it is hard to concentrate when you're carrying that much extra weight after a certain period of time because of the way that it puts a stress on your body.
Yes.
You know, there are physical attributes that are helped by that. But also, we do know that with
his footwork, remember, as a
Yeah.
keeper, how his hands are really good, but the footwork isn't as good, so that might catch up to him.
simple things like that, right? I think are a bit of an issue. But also on the other side of it, I do think that one reason why in cricket we've had so many bigger batters be successful is stillness at the crease is really important too, right? And bigger batters don't always move as much. Darren Lehman might have been one of the rare exceptions to that, but bigger batters usually keep a really still head. And so sometimes there's an advantage to being that. And as we see power hitters coming through, I think we're going to see more guys with Azam Khan's body in the next 10 years than we saw in the previous 10 years. And the reason being is guys like that can whack. When I was, 50 kilos heavier than I am now, I could almost hit a six any ball I wanted, right? If I timed it with my weight behind it, it was gone, right? I find it so much harder to hit sixes when I lost all my weight, right? Now, I could have just got fit and kept all that bulk and moved it into a different direction, which a professional athlete could do. But the point being is, look at baseball sluggers, right? And look at their body type. That is another kind of athlete that works in sport. And so if we just do things like he's overweight, so he's not good, it's not understanding the sport that we're talking about in the first place. But secondly, any player who has any weakness at all, it's always, if you're a party animal, right? And you're making runs, people ignore it. You lose form, it's probably because he's partying. We do the same with every single perceived weakness in athletes. If you have one of those perceived weaknesses, you know that coming in.
Absolutely. And he also got kind of exposed on the shorter length delivery versus express pace. So there's another caveat over there. We've got another super chat, but he hasn't really sent anything, Keshav Huria. So I'm not sure what's happening over there.
Let me just see if he put another one in. No, he hasn't. We're going to have to go.
Well, Keshav, we're going to have to end this one, but we'll be back with Uncovered, so we'll take your super chat on over there. Just a quick reminder to everybody that you guys can go to goodareas.co and bookmark that webpage. That can be your one-stop shop for all of our work, whether it be written content, podcasts, or videos. Thank you to everybody who turned up in the comment section and all of the people who sent super chats. Jared and I will be back with another episode of Overthrows next week. That is all for this week. And you guys have a good one. We'll see you next week. Goodbye. And to everyone on our live chat on YouTube, we'll be back after this short ad with episode 90 of the Uncovered podcast.
Thanks to the kind folks at FlexiSpot for looking after my office and my butt by sending me their E7 Pro desk that save your favorite desk heights at a touch of a button. You don't have to crank anything. This thing just finds the height that you like and you can work. And their BS12 Pro chair that supports my posterior while I'm recording, this ad and all my shows. If you need great desks, especially ones that change heights or the best quality chairs, head on over to FlexiSpot today.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 90 of the Uncovered podcast. I'm Behram Kazi, who you can find at DefMango on Twitter. And with me, as always, is Jared Kimber, who you can find absolutely everywhere. Before we get into the bones of this show, just want to tell all of you guys to go to goodareas.co and bookmark that webpage, which could prove to be a one-stop shop for all of our written work, videos, and podcasts. We've got a lot of people in the chat already and some super chats as well that we'll take towards the end. Jared, there are a lot of things to talk about in today's Uncovered podcast.
And yet there's no time, because if this episode goes too long, we're going to miss the next, the most important game of the World Cup so far.
No. This is going to be a shorter one. What I want to start with is actually not part of the official title. I did tell Subo to include it in the thumbnail at least. Rashid Khan, after defeating Australia, said that, it would be great to play Australia in bilaterals as well if we can play them in World Cups. And then Usman Khawaja of Australia kind of mirrored that sentiment in an interview where he said that, he doesn't agree with the policy that Cricket Australia have for Afghanistan, and he would love for Afghanistan to play bilaterals with Australia. Now, we know this is a complex situation with the women's cricketers not being allowed to play in Afghanistan, and how there's actually a full team and squad of like 20-something women of Afghan descent who were living there and then were shipped to Australia after the Taliban takeover. So it's quite a complex situation. Do you feel like all of these players are fully aware of the nitty-gritties?
No, I mean, Usman Khawaja probably is. but I don't think everyone else is. I've got the feeling that a lot of the Australian players don't want to play them as well. Like, obviously, Usman Khawaja is different, but I do think there are some other Australian players who don't want to play them. So that is complicated if that is true. I don't think it's a Cricket Australia. I don't think Cricket Australia on their own have come up with this anyway. But Usman is welcome to say that he wants to do the opposite. Like as you said, we've done a whole podcast on it. It is a tricky situation, the many different variants of it from, there was those tweets going viral this week about the fact that, Australia was part of the invasion of Afghanistan at that stage. That there's been plenty of other times when teams could have questioned Australia's treatment of Indigenous people or refugees. Other political stuff, other wars that Australia have been involved with that they had no right to be involved with or shouldn't have been involved with or whatever. So teams are free to do whatever they want. That is what a bilateral series is, right? It is a agreement between those two boards. And it is very, very disappointing. But realistically, Australia isn't going to solve, Cricket Australia isn't going to solve this issue, right? As we talked about on that other podcast. And the people who miss out on it are the Afghanistan men's team, right?
And I do feel sad and sorry for the men's team because this is not directly on them. But then again, if you guys want to get educated on this particular subject matter, we have a Footmarks episode called The Other Afghan Team. You can go and take a look at that. There are a lot of different caveats. And, Ireland and Afghanistan get the same budget as full member nations. And Ireland has to run 2 teams from it. Afghanistan has to run 1. So there is no one single right answer for this. And it's a very complex situation, which we provided potential fixes for in that podcast. So you guys should definitely go check that out. Moving forward, Jared, coming to the 100, the last time we spoke about it, we discussed how, the ECB and the MCC and all of those people have come into an agreement of how foreign stakeholders should be allowed and, they'll give away 49% shares, whereas 51% will be held by that particular county or whatever, or the ECB, I can't remember. But the latest that we know is that 5 different IPL franchises have expressed interest in buying a stake in London Spirit, the team that plays at Lord's. And MCC President Mark Nicholas has confirmed that, who has also called Jay Shah the most powerful man in cricket. I have said that water is wet, so you can continue.
Look, this has been going on for ages. When did I first hear about this? I think it was before it was first reported. Someone from one of the counties said to me that they had already had an offer. And from what I can tell, most of the offers have come from the 2 London sides. I don't know if Lancashire has quite been the same level of pool, and Birmingham will be the other one, of course. Or I should say Manchester and Birmingham will be the other 2.
I mean, the Northern Superchargers probably need it most, right? Yorkshire?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think Yorkshire is a massive market, right? So whereas Manchester obviously is a massive market. Of course. So that's what I mean. From what I heard, the 2 London sides have been inundated, and the first one actually was the Invincibles. And from what and the way it was explained to me was that was the one that they went after because they didn't think they'd be able to buy the Spirit. But obviously now that the Spirit seem to be a little bit more potentially available, although I don't think it will. I think Lords will just buy that team themselves and own it themselves, but I could be wrong. I think the MCC will buy it, I should say. And remember, the MCC almost bought an IPL team, and I think it was probably a mistake that they didn't when that was coming through originally. But yeah, so I think the major market teams are quite important, and that will happen. And I'm not surprised that that's what they, where you would go. It's no disrespect to Southern Brave and Welsh Fire and all these other sides, but we know where the money is. We know where the interest is, and so yeah, all those owners. I've heard offers had already been made before this 49% plan, right? And we're talking years before it, right? But there are so many technical details that are hard to overcome, like who owns the ground and how the ground is rented out, and all these different things isn't completely straightforward because England is not a straightforward country when it comes to things like that, right? So there are lots of interesting subplots, and these are some of the conversations. Also, 49%. If you give an owner a 49% share, I wonder, they will be buying that expecting to get more of a share of that team in the future.
We spoke about this last time, right? That
yeah.
49% is probably because they want to maintain some sort of semblance of power, the Englishmen. But whoever comes in and gets or buys that stake will want power. They will want to dictate terms, and the inevitability of Indian buyers coming into this entire fray is it's staring us in the face.
Well, also, let's say I don't know, the Ambanis buy Surrey, right? So they buy the Oval Invincibles. They buy 49% of that. And they say, do you know what? BCCI is about to let Indian players in. And you can get, let's say the Ambanis by that stage own, I don't know, Jaiswal, Bumrah, and I don't know, whoever else is the next big young star coming through. Rishabh Pant, right? They own those three guys. And they say, you'd have all three. But it starts to get really, really murky at that point. And I think once you let ownership in, the idea of it being 49%, it's like that's not how they're going to work. And so I think and they're so much richer than the ECB. I just don't see how opening that can of worms will and it's why Cricket Australia hasn't done it yet, right? Cricket Australia knows it's inevitable. They're trying to work out how to do it, and they want the money, but they don't want the issues. That's not how these things work.
Absolutely not. On that note, let's take a short break. You guys are watching Uncovered with Jared and Behram, and we'll be back with more off-the-field cricket news after this ad.
If you watch this channel, you'll love us on Main, where we do deep dives into the greatest cricket stories every week at Good Areas. How did Virat Kohli play that shot? What is so weird about Neil Wagner? And explaining the incredible misery of being a New Zealand opening batter. Visit our Good Areas site today. Want to show the world that you not only love cricket, but that you know the game deeply? Well, you need a Bodyline t-shirt. In fact, at Bodyline t-shirts, you can actually buy a t-shirt about Bodyline, but also tees inspired by the greatest players in our game. Head to Bodyline t-shirts today.
Welcome back to Uncovered. You guys are with Jared and Behram, and the next off-field controversial topic that I have to discuss with you, Jared, is that Pakistan cricket is in absolute frenzy since the team exited the World Cup in the group stages.
This is my shocked face.
Yeah, no surprises one bit whatsoever. Gary Kirsten apparently had some honest, sincere conversations, tough conversations with the team, and apparently they got leaked. Worst part is that all the news channels and these influential Twitter accounts were posting Gary Kirsten's statements as quotes, as if he said those things. So I remember when Gary took the job and said that, hey, I developed thick skin over time and I was inspired by Bob Woolmer. Welcome to Pakistan cricket, Gary.
Yeah. It's such a tough gig, right? It really is. And the way that it goes and everything. I did a podcast on Cricket 8 with Mega Sinner and we were talking about it. And I said, look, the issue is that what needs to happen is they need to identify a style that they want to play, a structure at which they find the players, a coaching system that works. And then there's still plenty of talent in Pakistan cricket to win another T20 World Cup. But they're going to have 3 or 4 more coaches between now and the next T20 World Cup, probably no matter what. So
yeah,
it's the same situation over and over again. If Gary Kirsten wasn't even really the coach, he was there for like a week beforehand, right? They didn't play very good cricket. Things went against them. It's more than fine for the coach to say that. If that's getting leaked, he can't do his job.
Remember
if he can't have a frank conversation, then he can't do his job.
Yeah, remember when Shane Watson was offered the coaching gig and initially he named a price? The PCB offered him 4 times the money and he rejected the offer. They gave him an offer that he couldn't refuse and he refused. That is because of the leaks. And these leaks are far too frequent in Pakistan cricket. And, you know...
It's not just the leaks. I mean, it's telling everyone how much you get paid. It's blaming you for things that you shouldn't get blamed for. It's the fact that you don't have complete control over the job. Right. So, you know, as someone who's worked I've said no to certain franchises before. And the reason I've said no is because I could see from the set, and because I've worked in a bad setup, like when I was at Solution, that was about as bad as you can get. I know what it's like to work in a bad setup, and I can see a bad setup from a mile off. I can be a great analyst, or I can be a terrible analyst. These are perfectly normal things for me to be. But being a great analyst in a bad system doesn't help anyone, right? And it's the same with being a great head coach in a bad system. You can't actually do anything, and you also spend your whole time dealing with other crap, right? Rather than doing the job.
Yeah, the media in Pakistan is so terrible that ever since they've exited the World Cup, different people are being accused of being part of agencies and stuff. Azhar Mahmood's wife, was accused of being part of some sort of sports agency where favoritism was being handed out, or they were, carrying out PR agendas and this and that. Azhar Mahmood has come out and he said that he will now take legal action. So I really hope he does that, because someone's got to put these media people, back in their seat and tell them that you just can't go on and say stuff out of your ass. There's another prominent journalist in Pakistan who everyone hates, by the way. His name is Mubashir Luqman, and he has said that Babar Azam has accepted cars and gifts and property, in return for throwing away big games. He has no evidence for this, and the proof of evidence falls on him.
Yep.
But no one is suing this guy, so we keep getting this crap, and I'm sick and tired of it.
It's not cricket journalism.
It's
right?
not. It's
And
not
that's-
even journalism.
And that's
It's not
the
even
biggest issue.
investigative journalism when you don't have any evidence.
Yeah, exactly. And, I would always say that the standard of cricket journalism is quite low, partly because of the way that cricket works, and we don't have to get into that now. But that is just trying to get attention for the sake of getting attention. It doesn't help Pakistan, and I don't see how it ultimately helps him, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should be making up things. I think that Scott Boland has a third nipple, and I would like you all to write about my fact.
A nubbin. Build that man a statue with a nubbin.
And it's not like a central nipple or anything. It's just got two nipples back to back right next to each other.
Yeah, I suppose so.
One's got a hair
That's
coming out of it, the
literally-
other one doesn't. I could give you
That's
facts all day.
literally the nature of news over here. But there's some ugly stuff that's happened as well. Haris Rauf got, into an altercation with
Yeah,
a
I saw that
fan
one.
in the USA. Then he said the word India. I don't know in what context, but if he said something racist, he should be slammed for that. But what people are missing out on is that his wife was there. You can't just go on and abuse a player in front of his wife. So they lost. I mean, he's a professional. People lose.
Yeah.
Abuse is not the way. Mohammad Hafiz is pissed off. He was on the Club Prairie podcast and said that 5 guys were sleeping in the dressing room when a test match was going on. Has he seen Jacques Callis or recently Manas who do the same? What's going on?
This is this whole thing that former players are like, well, in our day we didn't. Yeah, well, yes, they did. He would have played with players who slept in the change room.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that they were all sleeping together under one duvet. I find it hard to believe that there wasn't a reason, or whatever that may be, that was happening at that time. They're not losing because people are sleeping too much. They're not losing because they're not trying hard enough, right? They may not be playing good cricket. They may have other issues, but let's just go back to cricket for a moment. And that's the problem. Someone like Mohammad Hafiz should know better, right?
Yeah,
Wasim
really should.
Akram said some things at one stage where I was just like, what? Like, just, you guys know better? Don't just go to the easy answer because it'll make you sound like you care and they don't. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
And I know it's bullshit because I heard the Australians do it in 2022 when Australia didn't win the home World Cup after they'd won the previous World Cup. And then what did they win straight afterwards? Another World Cup and a World Test Championship. So you're telling me just for 5 minutes they weren't Australian enough and they weren't playing the Australian way. But for the rest of the time they were? It's fucking bullshit, right?
Plus,
Get
all of
to the
these
cricket issues.
journalists, all of these journalists and former players who are finding easy escapes and completely butchering the team, the writing was on the wall. Look at the team's performances. Look at the way the administration has shuffled and done bizarre things over and over and over again. We've covered them on Uncovered. Like every week, we have some stupid thing that's happened in Pakistan cricket, right?
There's not a Pakistani cricketer alive who doesn't know that one of the biggest issues is the PCB and the administration of cricket in that country, right?
Yep.
Bazid Khan released a statement when they lost, talking about the many issues. If that isn't where you start your conversation, I'm sorry, I can't take you seriously as a former player. If you're saying they sleep too much and they don't try that hard, fuck off. They looked like they were trying pretty hard against India. They looked like they were trying pretty hard when they came back late against the USA. It's cherry picking bullshit, is what it is, right? Don't get me wrong. Like many teams playing associates, they probably played in fourth gear because they thought they could get away with it. I've seen some other teams do that in this World Cup as well. The difference is they did get away with it, and Pakistan didn't. We saw South Africa do that. We saw the West Indies do that, right? We saw a lot of third and fourth gear nonsense. And England against Scotland was another one, right? The difference is Pakistan didn't get away with it. The weather went against them, and they didn't close out that game against India that they were on top of, right? Fine. Talk about the two losses. Talk about the cricket stuff that they got wrong. Talk about the fact that Mohammad Rizwan couldn't stop a friggin' ball behind the stumps. And no one told Mohammad Amir to stop bowling wide Yorkers when he couldn't pitch the ball in line. Perfectly normal cricket conversations to have. The rest of it can piss off and die.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like there is a big dearth in this country to actually have those cricket-related conversations. The journalists over here and the former cricketers talk anything but about the cricket, which is infuriating. But anyway, let's move on to. I don't know if this is a happier topic or it's sad because Kane Williamson. Recently, he stepped down from New Zealand's captaincy. He refused to take the job, in the future. Said that he's done. Also did not take or sign the new central contract. But interestingly enough, he has still pledged his availability to New Zealand in all three formats. What this tells me, Jared, is that there's a potential franchise gig in the offing, which is not an IPL gig because he's already playing that. I'm looking at the SA20 or maybe the ILT20 or one of those, conglomerate sort of franchises which have teams in multiple leagues which have signed him up.
Yeah, I don't know. We knew that with his elbow, he was probably looking to limit the amount of cricket that he would play in the future, although it seems to have healed pretty well at the moment. But I know he was pretty close to not being able to bat anymore, certainly at his level. It probably makes sense that he looks after his future a little bit more. He's probably going to coach somewhere. He's obviously got a great cricket brain. It's a shame for New Zealand. But I kind of think that they need to move on and find that next generation anyway. So I don't think I feel as sad about it as maybe other people do. But yeah, it's a new day for New Zealand cricket, and those guys have done their job, right? They won the World Test Championship final. They got New Zealand into positions to win other World Cups. And now it's the next generation and how good they are.
Yeah, and I mean, Kane Williamson, the New Zealand Cricket Board has said that they will be making an exception for him because he is New Zealand's greatest batter. So I can still expect them to pick him a lot for different series, but there will be, odd series where he will just sit out because he has other commitments. And if I think of all of this from Kane's perspective, he is towards the twilight of his career. He's probably done the math over here. What makes him more money? That New Zealand contract or some franchise gigs which could potentially, come his way. So I don't feel anything about it. I feel like this was the natural course of action and he's done his job for New Zealand. His days of T20 internationals are probably over before this World Cup as well, if we're being frank. Good on him to make this move, and I at least wish him the best of success. Lockie as well has turned down the central contract, as is Anrek Nokia earlier. So we're seeing this more and more in cricket now. And as we see like the Mumbai Indians franchise and the Super Kings franchise and the Royals franchise kind of have teams in multiple franchise tournaments, I expect this to happen more because then those franchises will just sign players.
Yeah, I think you're completely right on that.
Yeah. Anyway, that wraps up our itinerary for Uncovered. Let's just take our super chats and call, it quits on this episode. Aditya Bilal says, can you comment on how professional has cricket... Can you comment on how professional has cricket become compared to earlier, especially when it comes to players who are not in the national side?
Well, New Zealand domestic players didn't get paid to play domestic cricket until 2003. So, I mean, that tells you an awful lot. There's a great story between Shane Warne and Craig Howard. Two Victorian leg spinners come through at the same time. Shane Warne says Craig Howard's even more talented than him. Now, that's obviously Warney helping out his mate. Craig Howard was incredibly talented. Both of them ripped out their fingers, essentially, from spinning the ball so much. And Shane Warne went off to get special surgery, and Craig Howard came back as an off spinner. 7 years later because he could spin it with a different finger. That's essentially what we're talking about, is that there was no safety net for those guys. Dennis Lillee rebuilt himself on his own, and Australian cricket did next to nothing as an organisation to change that. And I think he was ranked, well, he was close to probably the world's best bowler when he got injured. And yet they just went, oh, well, we'll find someone else. That's how cricket used to be for national players. So domestic players, you either made it or you didn't. And no one really cared otherwise. Teams just had this feeling that they would always find someone else. The way that they treated those players wasn't acceptable, and it wasn't professional. And things have changed quite a bit. You could argue there are things that still need to be fixed, but most domestic cricketers around the world would at least be semi-professional at this point.
Yeah. And the women across the world who play cricket, a lot of them are just still amateurs, so there's a lot to change still.
Yeah, so women's cricket,
yeah,
even at the international level, you basically had to, I think it was an Australian woman who said once, if you play cricket for Australia, you have to choose on whether you want to have a mortgage or play cricket for Australia.
Yeah.
That's how far women's cricket has changed.
There you have it. Keshav Huria with his super chat says, what do you guys think of the Super 8 format? It's weird that even after being unbeaten all through, South Africa could have been eliminated today had they lost just one game.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked at it enough, but Super 8s is supposed to be cutthroat, right? At this time in a World Cup, if this was a proper World Cup, Keshav, like a football World Cup, maybe even a basketball World Cup, you would be playing Super 6. You might be playing Super 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, 1, right? You have to win all the games at the end to win a World Cup. We don't have a system that's quite like that. And we're going to have teams who are going to make the World Cup having lost in the Super 8s, right? Is that right? Yes. Afghanistan will have lost. Australia will have lost if they make it. Has England lost in the Super? Yeah, and England's lost. So, if anything, it actually goes against what you're saying. At this stage in the World Cup, you probably should be winning every game if you're going to win. That's the point. And so we don't really have that.
I would love to have a Super 10 stage where everyone plays everyone, but I think no one wants such a long T20 World Cup, right? Maybe in the future. Fingers crossed on that. Anyway, Path Right Winger says, he was surprised that Jared did not know Farooq Engineer. He did know Farooq Engineer. He'd met Farooq Engineer. He didn't know if he was Indian or Pakistani. I think that was the one. But Path's grandpa said he was a GOAT, greatest of all time, and he grew up hearing how he smoked Sir Wes Hall and Griffith at a time when players like Boycott and later Gavaskar would...
Yeah, we're only doing, just so everyone knows in Super Chats, if you can't get it into one message, because Path, your messages are now over 3. Right? I have to find the original one, then we have to go back. If you can't fit it in the first one, we're not going to do it. Farooq Engineer, as Bayram said that exactly. When I was younger, I didn't know that there were 2 Bert Sutcliffes, and that one was English and that one was New Zealand. Right?
I recently found that out.
Yeah. I thought Neil Adcock originally played for England and not South Africa. There's heaps of old cricketers that, you read about in a book, and if it doesn't say their nationality and you get it slightly wrong or you misremember it, and as I said, for 50s, not more so now, but certainly not in the old days. I knew a lot about up till pre-World War, actually both the World Wars. So I knew a lot about cricket up until World War II, and then I knew a lot of cricket.
Bernard Bosanquet wasn't the most famous Bernard Bosanquet.
Exactly. And then I knew a lot from about 1975 onwards. But the 50s and 60s weren't really my era as much. And so there's a lot of cricketers from that era where, like Richard Kalingi, I think it's Kalingi from New Zealand. I'd never heard of him. And yet, I think at one stage he had the 3rd most wickets of any left-arm bowler of all time. Carson Garvery, another left-arm bowler, I found out very late. Again, never heard of him. There's a lot of incredible cricketers, Path, that you have never fucking heard of, right? Yeah. And there are thousands of cricketers that go through the system. And as anyone who's ever followed my stuff is more than aware, I get names and countries and nicknames and everything confused quite regularly because I'm trying to batch remember thousands of cricketers, right? At any one stage.
It's the Chris Lynn, Chris Green, and Cameron Green paradigm with Jared. That's the one. Anyway, V! ! Says, what's the funniest crick pick of all time? And why is it Behram picking Jordan to defend 10 run in the last over? Hey, he's going to take a hat-trick in that last over, okay? I'm not going to hear any of that, V.
Wasn't your best work, was it, mate?
I'm going to go with Dilhara Fernando. That's the funniest pick of all.
That's probably worse, yeah.
Maybe one of mine as well. I have rogue hipster picks all over the place, and they're always usually, stupid, so that's fine. Sharveer Ashish says, can cricket go past football in popularity? Football is a global game, easy to understand, and I in Pakistan, whose country does not even play the sport, am hooked to football. So I don't know. Tough one. It's easy. That's why it's tough.
Yeah, I think football codes in general are just very different to whether it be tennis, cricket, well, actually rugby's on the more of a football code, but maybe not quite at the same level. But I think a lot of those other sports, hockey, I think they're fantastic, right? And obviously I like cricket more than I do like football. But there is something about Gaelic football, Aussie rules football, NFL, Federation football, whatever you want to call those different sports, right?
Yeah.
That for 90 minutes or for 2 hours, however long they take to play, seems to captivate people in a different way than cricket does.
Yeah.
And we see that everywhere. Like different versions of football exist in so many different countries and are just all consuming. So as I said, rugby union is the biggest sport in New Zealand, right? Rugby league in New South Wales and Queensland, Aussie rules football in the rest of the country, Gaelic football, so big in Ireland, all these different, and then you got the NFL and then you got football around the rest of the world. There's clearly something about those particular sports and the different moving parts and everything that work really well. I don't think cricket ever has to go, I've never even thought of it as an option of cricket going past football. But I think cricket's a wonderful game in a different way. But I don't think it has that same visceral impact on casual fans. So I think it would always struggle.
That's the one. It's nuanced. It's for nerds. I don't think it's the same sort of sport that can catch on fire like football, because everyone watches football. Sankalp Verma says, you don't regard Kane Williamson as a Fab Four level batter, Jared, and you've stats to back it. Do you think New Zealand has another batter of his prodigy level? Will New Zealand achieve such an era in near future with bowlers also past peak? The last part is something Jared has covered in every goddamn podcast. He thinks that bowling will drop off, and why New Zealand, if they won't be able to maintain the same sort of levels of high performance, it's because their bowlers are not going to be the same with all of those guys close to retirement. The first one I don't understand. That's what you think of Kane?
No, I mean, he's obviously in the Fab Four. It was literally named for him. I don't think he's at the same level as the other three. And I think there's certainly holes in his career that they don't have, the other three. But that still puts him in the Fab Four. Just doesn't put him in the top three of the Fab Four. And I kind of wish as a New Zealander he was better than the other three, just because, it would be nice. But unfortunately, it hasn't quite happened. It's not just losing Williamson. They've lost Williamson, Taylor, Watling, McCullum over whatever that is, a 5 or 6 year period. They can replace them, but it took forever for them to find Williamson. Like Taylor is probably in the top 70 or 80 best batters of all time. When you break down the numbers and you look at his career, I think that's right. I would have to go back to his overall record, but I think certainly all format batters, he would have to be very, very high in any kind of list that anyone would have. BJ Watling, brilliant number 6, who could also give you wicket keeping. McCullum, completely disruptive force. And then Kane Williamson, whether him or Martin Crowe or Glenn Turner is the best batter of all time, Kane Williamson has certainly got the best numbers of those three guys and has been absolutely fantastic. It's a lot of talent to cover. And the best way to cover that would be on the other side of the ball. And I think they're about to get worse with the bowling. So that's why I think New Zealand are going to struggle.
But they'll be back. Trust me when I say that, Sankalp, because they've got a professional system and athletes, are given priority in that country. And cricket isn't the only sport. So I trust New Zealand to be back at it. Anyway, that wraps up the Super Chats, which also means that this episode of Uncovered has come to a close. Thank you, everyone in the comments section who sent Super Chats and interacted with us. Just a quick reminder, you can go to goodareas.co and bookmark that webpage. That can be your one-stop shop for all of the work that we do as part of this team, whether it be written content, videos, or podcasts. We'll be back next week with another episode of Uncovered. You guys have a fantastic time till then. That's all for today. Goodbye.
Support us on Patreon and help us keep making our content. Join for exclusive perks like the AMAs, the live calls, and to chat with me directly on Discord. You can also enjoy ad-free content, early podcasts, and access to my emailer. Step up your cricket-style game with Bodyline t-shirts. Explore their exclusive player-themed t-shirts, including favourites like Virat Kohli, Kane Williamson, and Ben Stokes. They also have team-inspired designs and options for hardcore cricket nerds. Their collection offers something unique for every fan.